From Cenk Uygur himself, you tweeted, "I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election, even though I was so against the guy who won. I know now. MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated. It's not just that the establishment candidate lost, it's that their media is mortally wounded. The source of their strength was not insipid politicians like Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden. The source of their strength was their propaganda machine, the mainstream media. Now, online media is strong enough that their oppressive monopoly on the American mind has been broken. Now we're in the jungle. They hate that. I love it. This uncontrolled marketplace of ideas is where I'm home. I'd rather be in the populist woods than an establishment prison." So you got a ton of praise from a lot of conservatives saying that, well, Gunther Eagleman, they haven't been defeated. He calls you naive. Matt Gaetz said, "I've long said there are coalitions to be made between the populist left and the populist right." My first critique would be, it feels a little thick. It feels, the election just happened, and you're a guy who's very critical of Donald Trump in very, very heavy ways.
I still am.
So how do you think Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection on January 6th?
Yes.
And you think that that's not a mortal enemy of you? You think the establishment is worse?
No. So that's where it gets complicated. So Donald Trump, I was dead set against him. Number one, I don't agree with most of his policies. But number two, after he did a fake elector plot to overthrow the government and he said to terminate the Constitution, I'm out forever. I'm never, ever, ever going to vote for that guy. Okay? I don't care if he was a Democrat or a Republican. You write, I want to terminate the Constitution and I'm done with you. Okay, so I believe that before the election. I believe it after the election. I haven't changed a single policy position. I haven't changed a single opinion. Okay? So, but what that comes from, Tim, is that tweet is a genuine feeling that I had. And it's interesting because a lot of our viewers agreed with me, okay? And so the feeling is, wait, that's weird. I really didn't want Trump to win. Not like, yay, I wanted Trump to win the day after he won. No, I didn't want him to win, right? But so why do I feel this strange feeling of optimism, right? And I'm not optimistic about most of his picks. I'm not optimistic about most of his policies, et cetera. Certainly not the people who he surrounds himself with. And what I realized, and that's why I say it in the middle of the tweet, I know now. I figured it out. And what it is we, especially on the left, you're in an establishment prison, okay? So the minute you step out the guardrail, away from the guardrails, intruder alert, right? And so, how dare you say that it's the donors, you conspiracy theorists? How dare you say the politicians aren't honest? How dare you say that about Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden? Well, now the how dare yous sound hollow. They sound like, no. You guys are the morons who lost many, many times. So you don't get to say how dare you anymore, right? So that feeling of liberation within the left, within the Democratic Party, is what's critical. And the fact that we're no longer in a strictly left-right spectrum, that we're in a populist establishment spectrum layered on. Those are all incredibly hopeful things. And most importantly, it's that online media, for the first time, beat mainstream media. And so if that's true in a general election, I believe it could also be true in a Democratic primary, okay? Because our number one opponent in Democratic primaries is mainstream media. So Bernie wins in the first 3 states in 2020, and what happens? It wasn't just that the politicians coalesced. It's that all of cable news coalesced, and they all came in, Bernie's a Nazi. Bernie's going to execute people.
I don't think any of them called him a Nazi.
No, they literally did.
Did they call Bernie a Nazi?
Which mainstream media?
So first of
You're
all,
dumb enough to do that.
No, I don't. Wait.
They call
John
everyone they don't
Todd
like a Nazi.
said his supporters were brown shirts, which are Nazis.
Okay, but nobody's saying Bernie Sanders on these networks.
Yeah, no. I don't have the quote in front of me here. I don't have a computer, whatever. But someone insinuated that he was on that side, right? And so it happened 3 different times.
Do you think the election was stolen from Bernie?
Stolen is a word that's loaded, right? So
Agreed.
In 2016, the DNC funneled money from donors into the state parties and then to Hillary Clinton's campaign, okay? So that is illegal. They should not have done it. I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was illegal or outside the rules of the Democratic Party, but it was definitely outside the rules.
I think a lot of people cite in 2020 that because a lot of the different mainstream candidates decided to drop out at the same time is likely for a cabinet.
No, that's not
Joe
rigged.
Biden. You don't think that was okay?
No, that's just politics.
Yeah.
And to follow up, it kind of sounds like through this tweet, you're kind of talking about, I think you're talking outside of both sides of your mouth when you're saying MAGA is not my mortal enemy. My mortal enemy is the establishment. Can you be a little bit more explicit with what you're talking about policy-wise, because I feel like a lot of the things you are going to say is MAGA. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So
it
I
was
don't want
Chris
you to get
Matthews and Jonathan Lass. They both referred to Bernie Sanders as
Nazis?
his supporters
Chris
as brown
Matthews?
shirts.
But they didn't call him a not.
Yeah, Chris
right.
Matthews.
No, these are very different
apologized,
things.
But fair
and he
point.
stepped down.
They called his supporters brown shirts.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they've acted like it when Antifa came out and rioted very often. But
I
calling him
gotta do one thing real quick, because you said that Trump called for the termination of the Constitution. I'm going to read the quote. Trump posted, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner, or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections. I would draw the distinction in, obviously, I see you're more as a progressive. You're gonna view it from a left lens, which is Trump is saying this allows us to terminate the rules. My interpretation is he's saying, in general, a fraud of this magnitude would allow generally for anybody.
But Tim, he's talking about that election.
Indeed.
And number two, no, there is no provision in the Constitution says if some rando or a candidate or a president decides that he didn't like the outcome of an election, you could terminate the whole thing. All rules, regulations, and articles.
But
all terminate.
And the way the right views it is that he's saying the fraud they have committed is allowing them to terminate all the rules in the Constitution.
No, Tim, you're making crazy excuses. That's not what that
I'm telling you,
says
that's
at
what,
all, not 1%.
No, I'm not.
So he's saying it allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles in the Constitution. So what part of that is the left saying it? He's saying it.
No. My point is the left's perspective is Trump is saying this would empower him to terminate the rules. That's the argument they've made.
He's at least saying that I want to terminate the rules.
But that's the left perspective. The right perspective is he's saying the actions that have been taken allow in general for these people to basically violate the rules of the Constitution.
No, that doesn't make any sense. That's not even close to what he said.
Well, I understand that's your perspective. I'm telling you what conservatives are saying.
Yeah, I don't even think conservatives are. Have you seen that anywhere?
Yes.
I mean, that's a fun interpretation that you had. But
that's
I could just
basically
reverse everything that Biden. Well, Biden said he was young and dynamic, but he meant he was old and senile.
It would be like saying precedent from the Supreme Court would allow us to do X, Y, or Z, not saying that you intend to do it or want to do it, but the actions taken by the Supreme Court are allowing the states to do something, right? So when the left says the overturning of Roe v. Wade is going to allow for women to be put in, red dresses and caps, they're not advocating for the Handmaid's Tale. They're saying a court precedent would allow for something like this to happen. That's the perspective from conservatives, and that's why when you say,
"Wait, how?" I don't get it at all, Tim. How in the world is Trump saying a massive fraud like this means that you terminate all rules and regulations of the Constitution and articles of the Constitution? How is that interpreted as he thinks the left is saying it?
So in the instance of the Supreme Court issuing a ruling on Roe v. Wade, if a Democrat said this allows for women to be forced to give birth, that's not a Democrat saying they want to force women to give birth, is it? They're saying...
Yeah, but Trump isn't saying that. Trump is saying that because of the fraud against him, we should consider or terminate all rules, regulations, and articles of the Constitution. It's not at all unclear.
I'm not telling you that that's not your interpretation. You're not entitled to it. I'm saying conservatives view it from another lens.
Yeah, I think that's wishful thinking because they want to make excuses for it.
By all means, you can think that. That's why almost every single Trump supporter will say he did not say to terminate the Constitution.
Yeah, that's just nonsense. You're just looking at it and go, okay, I'm going to read it in backwards. So if Bernie said that, I'd be done with him in a second. In 1 second flat. Any politician I support says, maybe we should, there was something, he was an injustice against me. Let's terminate the Constitution. No, get the hell out of here. That's it. I'm done with you. He does. All right, whatever.
I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Right, look, I don't, look, we can argue about the English language. Maybe in German he doesn't mean that, but in English, he said terminate the Constitution. He didn't say the Democrats think to terminate the Constitution. He said the exact opposite. And Tim, it's not 1% unclear. So conservatives can take that and go, okay, I wish to interpret it as him talking about the left, even though he says it's about him and the fraud against him. You can wish to a sentence to mean anything you want, but that's what it means. And guys, what are we pretending that he didn't try to steal the election? I know
I don't think he did.
Okay, yeah, all right. So I mean, we could go back in that old debate, but it doesn't really matter because he won this time around. right? So we're
point.
done with it. Now, if he goes back and says, "Oh, I'm not leaving," then we're not done with it, and that's part of what I'm worried about. So that's why
84 by that point, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm less worried now because the popular vote was on his side. So now the right.
You're not seriously scared of him staying in office for another term, because I've
Well,
heard that before. Like, I don't know if you
No,
seriously
but here's
believe
the
it.
thing, brother. When somebody says, "I'm going to terminate the Constitution," when someone says, "Oh, I don't have real electors, I have
When
fake
somebody
electors,"
says, "I'm not going to pardon my son," and then pardons my son, we're dealing
Yeah,
with politics,
pardon-
and all of these guys are full of it and liars.
nonsense,
All right.
nonsense.
So lies
okay?
from Republican matter, but not lies from Democrats.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because both Biden and Trump have done horrific pardons, egregious, unacceptable pardons. But Trump doing a pardon of Charles Kushner, which is very similar to Hunter Biden's pardon, is terrible. But I wouldn't say, "Oh, you should never vote for that guy. You can't vote for that guy. That means terminate the Constitution." It doesn't mean any of that. It just means it's a crappy pardon, okay? So there's a giant difference between, "Hey, I disagree with you," or "You did something really wrong," and I'd like to end the country by ending our Constitution and our democracy. So to Tim's point, whether you guys agree with me or not, whether the right wing agrees with me or not, that was my concern, okay? So am I less concerned about it now? Yes, not because they've changed it all, but because Trump won the popular vote. So there was a lot of talk from the right wing of, "Oh, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Screw democracy. We don't want democracy." Pete Hegseth writing in his book about we should, gerrymander so badly that the Democrats never win
Yeah,
again.
but there's a bunch of Democrat books talking about packing the Supreme Court, and now we're going to
I
add
hate it.
states.
And I hate it.
All right. And so I'm not a fan of democracy. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.